Alright guys, we are back in my car for another video, and today we're going to be discussing B58 reliability. Like a lot of my videos, I'm trying to answer questions that most of you guys ask me, and this one's probably at the top. You know, a lot of you guys are looking at cars with the B58 and you want to know, is it reliable? Is it something that can, you know, go higher mileage? Maybe you're getting a deal on a car that has over 100,000 miles or something like that. So you're just wondering what to expect or if it's worth getting into one, you know, or are you going to be plagued with a bunch of BMW issues like what you've heard in the past? I think asking if a B58 is reliable is a pretty simple question, but a lot of people kind of overcomplicate it, and as enthusiasts, we probably have a little bit of a bias, so we try to rationalize things that don't need it. But in the end, I think the question is pretty simple to answer, so we'll talk about it in this video, and hopefully you find it useful. Now, as always, for everybody that's new to the channel, I create these videos to help keep you updated on the latest developments in our community, as well as discuss technical topics so that we have a better understanding of how our engines work. So if you're interested in more videos like that, be sure to subscribe because there will be a lot more coming out in the future. So like I said, you know, reliability isn't really that complicated of a concept. When people ask if an engine is reliable, they're pretty much trying to ask, am I going to have a high likelihood of running into issues that will require me to go to a shop or something outside of regular maintenance? So, you know, when the engine was designed, the engineers decided that it needs to go for service every 3,000 miles, 5,000, 10,000, whatever. And that maintenance interval will allow the engine to last as long as the car lasts. So people don't want to have to go outside of that. You know, you don't want to have to take a tow truck home or whatever. And they just want to know, like, what are my chances of running into issues? So I think from that standpoint, I mean, the B58 is not bulletproof. We all know that. But there is a level of reliability for most enthusiasts that is kind of like deemed acceptable, because I see two different trains of thought, especially when dealing with German cars. So the first one is, you know, maybe you've been with a certain vehicle type, or, you know, you've been buying cars from a specific OEM for a while, and the new version of your car with the latest engine is more reliable than the old one. So that means the new one's reliable no matter what. You know, everybody that's used to working on the old car looks at the new one and says, oh, that one's the reliable one, right? And then the other aspect, which I'm guilty of falling into, is it might not be that reliable, but if the issues don't leave you stranded, they're cheap to fix, the car's easy to work on, you know, and basically you can manage it yourself, then it's reliable. And that one I definitely am very much sympathetic towards, because you guys see my videos. I do a lot of work on my own cars. I do a lot of the DIYs and stuff. So if it's something that basically I can get home and I don't have to get a tow truck and I can fix it relatively simply, it's reliable enough for me, especially if it's an enthusiast car that I'm not buying as like a daily driver or beater or something like that. It's something that I'm willing to sacrifice a little bit on that end of things in order to buy a car that's more fun. You know, that's kind of where I draw the line. The B58, I think, definitely falls in there, and we're fortunate because this engine is in a lot of cars that are, you know, kind of driven towards more of the performance side of things, like the Supra, some of the smaller M-Light cars like an M240i and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, it's a fleet engine. It's something that they put in everything from a 1 Series all the way up to an X7. So there are literally millions of examples out there, and we get really good data on it really quickly. So from that standpoint, I feel like the engine is reliable enough for most enthusiasts, but there are a couple things that you do need to watch out for. One, of course, is absolutely the PCV, which I'm going to try not to get on my soapbox too much here, but a lot of people try to give our cars, you know, too many passes, right? And you guys have seen the posts and stuff online probably. You know, people say, oh, I was waiting outside of my kid's school and, you know, 30 minutes later or whatever, a big puff of smoke comes out of my engine. You know, did my engine blow up? Can I drive it home? Like, what's the problem? And it's almost always a PCV issue. You know, I think at this point we pretty much understand the problem, but I just get so frustrated when I see people say, oh, why are you letting your car idle for so long? You shouldn't do that. It's not good for the car. And it's just insane to me, you know? Being at idle is like the lowest amount of load and stress that your engine sees besides literally just being off. Like, there's no reason why a car should have an issue from idling too long. And I've shared this in some of my previous PCV videos. I think the issue is related to like our Valvetronic system, and the car just doesn't have enough vacuum at idle, and so, you know, pressure builds up and it can potentially damage that diaphragm. Again, pretty simple to fix, pretty cheap to fix, but that's no excuse. That's not something that should be an issue with cars, especially one that BMW knows is a part of, you know, their new modular system that they're putting in all their future vehicles. But, you know, again, not that big of a deal when it happens. You guys can get back on the road relatively quickly. And then the other thing that I probably hear the most about is either oil loss, oil consumption, or coolant loss and coolant leaks. And these two things are a little bit funky because there has been a trend with BMWs and German cars in general with having oil leaks and having coolant leaks, but the B58 doesn't have the same type of issues that the older engines have. So for example, in my car, I did have a coolant leak or coolant loss on my 440i. It ended up being the cap on one of the reservoirs was allowing coolant to evaporate past it. So I know sometimes I see people say like, oh, my coolant's low, what should I check? And I saw this guy say, oh, you know, on German cars, you have to replace all the coolant hoses every 50,000 miles. Otherwise, they all crack and start leaking. And it's like, that's not really an issue on modern BMWs, thankfully. I've seen it on older ones, and that's not something that you want to have to deal with. But, you know, it's just something that you need to kind of address differently. And when people hear some of these blanket statements, they just say, oh, it's BMW problems again, when really it is a little bit unique to this platform. Also with the oil consumption, thankfully, this is not so much of an issue with Gen 1s, but on Gen 2s, it seems like some of the cars have either manufacturing defects or something where they have oil consumption issues. It's typically identified pretty quickly if it is an engine problem. Like, people see it within the first 5 or 10,000 miles, and they're able to work with the dealership to try to get it addressed. But it does seem like something that's kind of annoying, because even when I was having my coolant loss, my dealership didn't want to deal with it. All they want to do is just keep topping off your fluids instead of addressing the root cause of the problem. So if you do experience any of those issues, especially at lower mile, newer cars, I highly recommend really pushing your dealership to work on addressing the problem, because it absolutely is not normal and not something that I would consider acceptable. Now, outside of that, I think we hear a mixed bag of a lot of other different things that people run into. One of them is like injectors that can fail. And unfortunately, this is just kind of a part of the game, you know, especially with electrical components. O2 sensors can fail, sensors can fail, all kinds of different problems can happen with these parts, and it's really just up to you to, you know, stay on top of the car. Because what I recommend is paying attention to everything the car is doing, and if you see any issues where the car is starting to misfire, idle rough, you know, kind of having low power and things like that, fix the problem quickly. If you don't, you can potentially create other issues that can cause further damage. And I think that's something that a lot of people might not be used to, because if you're like my parents, you know, you've pretty much only had Toyotas and Hondas, and you never really had to worry about maintenance, which is kind of a gift and a curse. You know, when you upgrade and want to buy a German car or something more on the luxury side of things, you're really going to have to stay on top of your maintenance, because otherwise you're going to create a lot more issues. And that's what I started running into, or see people running into, with, you know, engine damage and things. It seems like it's caused by problems that they may have been ignoring or they thought weren't a huge issue, and then over time it caused more significant damage. But again, it just depends. You know, like I said, especially if you're tuning your cars, you should be regularly scanning for codes, running logs, making sure that it's all healthy. That's the easiest way to make sure that you stay on top of things and you don't potentially, you know, leave a problem out there for too long that can eventually leave you stranded or cause a really expensive repair. Now, personally speaking, I'm not on the side of things that says all of this stuff needs to be replaced regularly. So I know a lot of people out there say, you know, replace your injectors every 30,000 miles, 50,000, 60,000, whatever. They just kind of create these arbitrary numbers that they're comfortable with. And something that I've had an issue with in the past is throwing too many parts at a problem, because sometimes you can actually create issues just by replacing things too frequently. Sometimes they come out of the box bad, or sometimes you damage something inadvertently. And especially with these parts that aren't, you know, included in your standard maintenance plan, you got to consider that the engine wasn't designed to service those components frequently. So there might be parts of your engine that just aren't designed to have screws going in and out of it constantly, and now you've potentially, you know, cross-threaded something or stripped out a hole, and you're going to have even more issues at that point. So again, I think the biggest thing that you can do if you do decide to go with a B58 and you want to make sure that it's reliable, just stay on top of your maintenance. Make sure that you're identifying any potential, you know, weird, odd things that the car is doing quickly, and get it fixed quickly and get back on the road. And of course, you know, stay on top of the forums and things where people talk about their problems, because I think just having a little bit more visibility to those problems and knowing what it is when something arises can really put your mind at ease, because now you know what to expect. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you know, the B58 is a great engine, especially for enthusiasts. I don't think it's bulletproof or completely problem-free. I know a lot of people that have driven them over 100,000 miles without any issues, but there is a chance that you're going to run into problems along the way. And fortunately, it seems to be relatively easy and cheap to fix for majority of, you know, the more common issues. But yeah, you know, I highly recommend it to you guys. Obviously, I have 2 of them, so I've kind of picked my poison in this part of the game, and hopefully BMW just continues to improve things as their engines progress. So I think that's it for this video. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope this helps. And if you have any other questions or comments, leave them down below. All right, guys, we are back in my garage for